You sound like Mr. Hanky singing that song. Hey, Hanky, you sure do look flowery. Hush, hush. Okay, so we're back.
Welcome to Fretful Dreams.
Fretful.
Why aren't we calling it Fretful Dreams? Is it because guitar is a nightmare? Or
Sometimes it can be.
yeah,
You know?
that probably should be the segment we have come back again and again. Would be like, what are your guitar nightmares?
Yeah, guitar nightmares. That's a good
There
one.
you go. What are your guitar nightmares, Randy?
Are we talking about scary things that have happened while you're
Or
playing?
things that you worry might happen when you're playing, or
Any general gear breakage? Like I'm
on
the
stage?
guy
Oh,
on
man.
stage.
Your pedal
I'm
board
the-
going down on
It's
stage.
always a pedal board. And see, but I'm the guy who
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. This is what we're going to do. I know where my input is.
Yeah.
I know if
Into
that
the
one
amp.
is dead, worst comes to worst. If it's not fixed in 3 seconds, I'm going straight into the amp until I can get
Yep.
time to look at it.
Yep.
But I'm also the guy who has doubles and triples, and like I carried a lunchbox full of stuff. Like I didn't just show up to a gig going, well, hopefully. I had fuses and I've had,
Yeah.
I carried all that stuff. Now, did I ever use it? Very, very seldomly.
Yeah.
But
Boy Scout.
right, that was by the way, you may or may not know this about me. I quit the Boy Scouts after two of the meetings.
I was a Weebelo.
I bet you were. So when my dad took me to J.C. Penney's to buy the uniform, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And he's like, this is a uniform. I'm like, I can't wear jeans. He's like, no. I'm like, I'm not doing this.
You didn't even make it in the first
Right.
meeting.
Right. I'm like, I'm not doing this. And what is that thing? What is that?
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
I that carried the
Oh,
what is that called? Like I wore that in high school.
Ascot.
No. Well, the ascot. Okay, I'm thinking of the Texas thing where
Bolo
tie. I guess is that where
Yeah,
where
yeah.
it's the two like the wound.
Yeah, that's a
leather.
bolo tie. Yeah, I bet you got all the tail with that.
Absolutely none. Then I was wearing I went through a period where I was wearing all kinds of Indian jewelry too because for some reason I thought that I had Cherokee lineage. So
Oh wow, this is great.
Dances with Wolves was big, and
Yeah, right.
and then
Yeah,
why did I get bullied? I have no idea. It doesn't make sense.
it really doesn't. when you
Bolo
think about
ties
it.
and
Dances with wolves.
Dances with Wolves
So
jewelry.
did you have a
and-
bolo tie with God? This would have been
rhinestone and or
funny. The blue rock. What the crap is it called? That all the Indian jewelry is.
yes, of course I did.
Yes. So you had the bolo tie with that. And
Yeah,
what am I-
well, it was
what am I
it was
trying to
like
say?
silver. It was a silver
Right.
little pendant thing, and I had 2 or 3 of them that had different centers, and I think one of them was black onyx, and one of them was like eye of the like what they call them, tiger's eyes,
Yeah.
and then one of them I think was blue.
What is the name of-
Sapphire?
No,
No.
not sapphire. I'm talking about the blue rock stuff that all the.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Why can't I
Glittery.
think of the name of that? What is the name of that crap?
I don't remember, but oh yeah, I
Yeah.
totally bought it up at Tallulah Gorge from
Right.
some some Native American dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like on the side of the road, like totally, absolutely.
Well, you've seen my my high school yearbook picture where I have the pink button down on with the mullet with 3 lines.
Yes,
Yeah. So we were both just knocking down.
knocking it down.
Yeah, we're just running through it back then those days.
South Cobb High School, baby.
Right. Well, I was in Forsyth, Georgia at Mary Persons High School.
I'm
Hey,
sorry.
anybody who's listening to this from Mary Persons, congratulations on having a radio.
Mary Persons. That's
Yeah.
a great name.
Yeah. Sounds like there should be a musical about her.
Mary Persons.
Yeah, with a umbrella and stuff.
Oh, is it not Merry?
no, it's not.
M-A-R-R?
It's yeah, it's
It needs to
actually
be Mary, like Merr.
no,
Mary
no.
Persons.
No, never that.
Jazz hands.
No, Mary. She was an actual person named Mary Persons.
How old were you when you started playing guitar?
Okay. So it started off playing drums, and I played drums.
Did you really?
Yeah. So I played drums from 12-ish.
Did you? Okay. You had like a kit?
I got a kit at 13.
See, that's what I wanted when I was in band geek, middle school band geek, 6th grade. Saved my life.
Yeah.
Music, totally, that age. But I wanted to play drums, and my parents were like, "Nah, it's too loud." And I was like, "Okay, I'll do saxophone then."
Yeah. So my dad had guitars. My dad was a guitar player, songwriter type guitar player. So I played a guitar from, the age of like 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And he would teach me a chord or whatever,
Right,
and then
I wasn't calling you.
Right. It wasn't. But at 13, I had a kit. I had like this cheap little like Gretsch, it was a blue sparkle Gretsch kit that was like one of the Sears catalog Gretsch kits though.
Yeah.
I didn't have any, no cymbals at all. I had a hi-hat. I remember
nice.
I had a hi-hat, but no cymbals. So it's like, how do you,
dude, that's all. If I've told you this,
right.
If we were to start a band with me on drums, it would be hi-hats, floor tom, snare, kick drum. That's it.
Right.
Brilliant combo. You can do so much with that.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess 15, I was going through a lot of crap. And who'd have thought? And I picked up my dad's acoustic guitar and really kind of started playing. He taught me this little blues shuffle thing. You know? It's like a blues shuffle in E. So anytime I pick up a guitar, that's probably the first thing I'm going to play. So I really started playing at 15, and then at 16 is when I bought my first electric and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
about the same age for me. My dad had an acoustic sitting around, actually, like the acoustic kind of behind me over here. I don't think you can see it on camera, but Yamaha like string. This is why I have we can talk later about like our choices of string height, but crazy stupid high string height because it needed to be completely broken down and rebuilt.
Neck reset and the whole night.
But I didn't take to it. Like it was around and like, I wanted to learn, but it was just too hard to play that damn thing.
Right.
And until my hands got bigger and stronger, I didn't even mess with it. But probably around 12, I want to say like 6th grade.
Something like that. Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah.
Fifth grade, 6th grade, I started playing and once I got that Kramer, I talked about in last episode, but I was obsessed and like sat in my room with my Vivian Campbell posters and my George Lynch posters and what else? Eddie Van Halen, of course. I had the Eddie Van Halen poster with the Frankenstein guitar on it. And just sat and, kind of leaned up against the bed and with my little crate amp and played for hours and hours and hours, learned to finger tap and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. See, I did a lot of like acoustic playing before I probably a year and a half or so before I got an electric guitar. So I was learning how, I played a bunch of Poison tunes and Cinderella. I used to have this one chick I would call every night and sing her a Cinderella song. I'm like, one of these days.
Don't know what you got.
Right. One of these days.
It's gone.
No, it wasn't that one. It was like, I think it was called Last Train.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That first Cinderella album is not a bad album.
Dude, Cinderella's a great band.
Well, they were a great live band.
Yeah.
I saw them at the Omni opening for, was it Whitesnake or somebody like that?
Yeah.
I can't remember. It was either Rat or somebody like that. And blew me away. Like they were great live. It didn't sound like the record at all. It sounded way better than the record.
Yeah, they were a rock and roll band. I mean, they really were a rock and roll band.
They were glossed up on their productions for sure. Because it did not sound like, it sounded more like, do you remember the band Kix?
Oh my God. So yes.
Yeah, it sounded like Kix because it was more raw, like Hanoi Rocks kind of vibe going live. And it was really cool. I was really surprised. Speaking
of last episode, we talked about amps and different amps. And all the Kix albums were recorded with a PV Bandit.
Were they really?
All their albums.
There's some great guitar tones.
Were recorded with a PV Bandit.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So,
some good guitar tones on that.
You guys know we're all from Atlanta. One of the local club owners in Atlanta that owns Star Bar, Dusty Booze, is a Kix freak. This dude freaks out about Kix.
Really?
He'll drive 1,000 miles to go see him. And I had some Kix tablature books that I got from like when they were new in like early 90s. And a friend of mine passed me that. I gave him that stuff. You'd have thought I just gave him $1 million. It was awesome.
Tears.
Yeah. It's funny that you brought up Kicks. Yeah.
Oh, I loved Kicks, man.
Yeah.
I was a huge Kicks fan. I liked all that hair metal stuff. Like I liked the grittier hair metal. Like, the grittier it got, the better I liked it. But the more it stuck with me. But
Right.
It's like
I mean, really, when you think about it, the hair metal stuff was, some of it was very, very, very glossed over and very cheesy.
very.
But a lot of it was Hanoi Rocks.
Yeah, it was
type
just, it was
stuff,
just, it was
you know,
just,
and it was.
yeah.
It
was just rock and roll.
But again, Alice Cooper did it 20 years before.
Sure.
I think there's
T-Rex.
Right.
And,
sure.
like, you know,
There's
Bowie.
a joke going on where, you know, Alice Cooper's done it already, you know, and they're like, I've got this idea. We're going to do this. And like, Cooper, 77. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, you asked me, you know, what's your scary gear?
Getting up on stage and either like feeling like you've completely forgotten all the songs, or somebody calls out a song that you were not supposed to be playing in the set, like you hadn't prepared at all,
right?
And they're like, and then this would not happen in my bands today. People would be murdered. We would murder each other, but like you don't go in unprepped. But like I've been in a situation where like, let's just play this one, and like. Yeah, don't throw songs at me spur of the moment. I don't see how people do the cover band thing where they know.
Yeah.
Like we've got
I used
mutual friend Andrew Knox, like he does that stuff, and they can rattle off 80 songs.
Right. And they
how?
But it's a whole different animal. I used to make fun of the whole cover band thing.
I respect it.
But now I respect it because like it takes a lot of work to do that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just knowing how to comp stuff, like, you know, and knowing I'm sure a lot of it comes down to the Nashville system of like knowing the chord changes and stuff.
Sure, but
I don't play that way.
Yeah, me either, and it's not anything. Now, if you were to call me and say, "Hey, I've done probably 20 gigs in a ton of different bands," where they'd say, "I need you to play a gig like 2 days from now.
Here's the set. Listen to it and figure it out." Yeah.
I've done that a bunch and love that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
love doing that kind of stuff. That's great. That's fun. Like I've always felt good about doing that, and I will put in the work for that. But as far as doing that kind of stuff, it's
no.
We both have the same thing. Like not feeling, I guess, comfortable or.
Well, I just know that I can't. Like I've never been able to do a cover that people in the crowd would consider an accurate cover. Yeah. Like it's always my rendition of it that's completely abstracted and weird. And I love doing that, but like people are like, why did you ruin that song? Yeah. Like, why did you ruin my favorite song? Why would you do that?
You know, we would do a cover or two here and there, but you know, as far as just the like gear or the story of what you're worried about, like that feeling of I don't belong here on stage is the worst. Terrible. So we haven't gotten into this much, but you know, King Electric Guitars is my company. Started it 2 years ago. Built, I think I'm on number 16, something like that now.
Yeah. Was that like 15 or something?
Several of these here are King Electric Guitars.
Yep.
That was, I think, guitar number 2 that I built. But anyway, I guess I could have the same ethos as playing music as I have making tools for somebody else.
So in other words, you're not going to be a cover artist and play and do like an exact replica guitar and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's only so many chords. There's only so many shapes. There's only so many, you know, but I try to do my own thing at least with something. So yeah.
Talk to me about your resonator guitar idea, since I don't know much about this. I'm really curious how this is going to work.
So I've always wanted to build a resonator.
Yeah.
Just because. And I've lately been watching some stuff and I realized that they're not welded. For some reason, I always thought they were welded together. Well, my wife happens to be it's funny, I married her and didn't know this until after we were married, but she's certified at MIG and TIG welding. I was like, well, I'll get her to weld it. She's my wife and I love her to death, but we don't always work well together on certain things. And I was like, oh my God, this could be a problem, you know, because she has her vision. I have my vision. Yeah. That's the reason why we don't have a company together. We do 2 separate things.
Yeah.
But then I realized, well, wait a minute, these are actually brazed, and that's like soldering it. I can do that.
Yeah.
So I've always thought that resonators are cool. Always wanted one, but never could afford one. And so I realized, wait a minute, if I can build a neck and I can cut out sheet metal or, whatever I happen to make it out of, and I've started watching this, like, I can build a resonator. Well, my love and my thing for everything kind of late 50s, early 60s kitschiness. And I thought, how cool would it be to make a resonator, and what you call a tricone, not the round cone resonator, but the one that has the like pick shape almost where the resonator is. In this wacky 50s, 60s, I sent you that picture of the Orbitron, which is a hot rod that was made years ago.
Right.
Everything is car influenced for me. So how could I do this and make this electric guitar in this wacky shape, but also make it a resonator?
So are you thinking that you're going to have a pickup in the resonator?
I don't think you can do that. I think that would just be nothing but ridiculous feedback. I mean, because what a resonator is yeah, I know. And is that a bad thing? I mean, resonator.
You're not talking me out of this, Randy.
A resonator is basically a speaker, So you have cones and you have the whole.
I mean, every resonator electric guitar I've seen from like, who is it that does a lot of them? Like,
National. National's the biggest one.
Yeah, I guess.
Mulecaster. Mule makes some.
Yeah, I'm thinking of who did the Longhorn here? I'm flaking.
Dan Electro. Yeah,
Dan Electro's got some.
Dan Electro has resonators.
Yeah, I think so. Huh. But they all have just the neck pickup,
right?
And then the resonator below that.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, like, if you could put a pickup in the resonator.
I don't know.
What that would sound like.
Or can we put a neck pickup, a resonator, and a pickup? Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is I want to build a resonator just to say I did, but I don't necessarily know there's going to be a resonator model out. But I have another idea. I'm working on the Space Dolphin. Again, I'm really into some of the 60s Japanese stuff, but there was also some really cool guitars. They were sure made in Japan, but in the 80s and in the 90s, there was some really cool stuff. Fernandez had some really wacky guitars back in the 90s that are really cool. And one of them's called a Vertigo. And I look at that guitar and I'm like, okay, that as a resonator would be just ridiculously cool. That idea, not that exact shape. So
sure.
That's where I'm at with that. Who knows? It might be the dumbest thing ever, but
it's going to be like based on a semi-hollow body kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of a semi-hollow kind of thing, kind of a 335 style thing, but just a completely different body shape.
Let's talk about recording guitar, like your experiences with recording guitar. I mean, when we worked together, I kind of know what went down, but you can talk about like, how you've recorded it in the past and what you found with different amps or guitars or what works, what you like, what you don't like. And
well, I'd like to say that, from the day you start playing guitar, your ultimate goal, I would hope, is to record yourself playing, to record your own songs, so recording was always for me just this amazing experience. I never ever walked into a recording studio and felt scared, no matter
never got red light syndrome.
No.
Me neither, but
the first time
rare.
I was ever in a real studio was down in Orlando, actually. My friend from Valdosta that I've talked about a few times, he'll be a guest soon, Ben Owens, was with a band and they were doing some recording, and it was at Lake Burton in Orlando. You know what Lake Burton is?
Yeah, I've been there.
So the studio was the people that owned all that land. They sold to all these amazingly rich people.
Yeah,
it was their original house, and there was a studio in there. So I don't think I did much that day, but I know I did, a few little tracks or whatever. And it was like, oh, this is cool. And, whatever, cool. I got some time there, to see what a real studio was.
Right.
And then the next time I actually did any recording, my friend Vinny was recording at a place. There used to be a studio here called Southside Studios. And he was going to be doing this little kind of singer-songwriter thing with a friend of his. It was just this acoustic number. I learned it on Tuesday and we went in the studio Wednesday. and did our parts. We both recorded acoustic guitar together at the same time to a click track.
Mm-hmm.
Or, well, to a metronome.
Right.
That was, tell you what year that was.
Yeah.
There was a metronome. And so we get done with the parts, and I was like, oh, that was really fun, man. That was cool. Vinny goes, okay, now record a solo. And I was like, all right, cool. So I walked in there, and just, it was nothing special. I did what I do. I played,
pentatonic rock and roll.
I played pentatonic rock and roll solo.
Thin Lizzy solo coming up right here.
Right.
There's another Thin Lizzy solo.
Exactly. But I did that, and it worked out great. And then Vinny was like, now I'm going to record drums over all this.
Is that the same Vinny?
Yeah, same guy. So that was day one. Now, one track on the
man, that he did drums last.
He did drums last.
Crazy.
Yeah. Because the more we did stuff, the more we're like, oh, this needs to be more than. So yeah, he did drums last.
And then but you still kept all the guitars.
Yeah.
It's just worked.
He was that dude was literally a metronome. His timing was impeccable. So
tough to do.
But anyway, so, anything I ever recorded was never had to like slave over tracks.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also been a lot of times, and I don't know it's the best thing in the world, but I've also played these songs 50 times before we recorded them a lot of times.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know what you're doing kind of thing. But I've never had red light syndrome. I've never freaked out in the studio. Because again, my ultimate goal was always to have this stuff down. I always wanted to have my own stuff. So, I did a lot of recording with several different bands at that place I was talking about. I was in a punk band for a night. I joined on a Thursday, and Friday we recorded our album. The band is called Big Fist and the Fuck You Ups.
And then you were fired on Saturday?
No. We recorded our album. Total time in the studio, once we hit record, was 36 minutes. We recorded 12 songs.
Yeah. All like 2 minutes. Yeah.
Right.
Minute and a half, 2 minutes.
So, that was, so I did a bunch of that kind of stuff. And then when I started Red Rocket Deluxe, I was working with a friend of mine. He recorded a lot of our stuff after that. Guy named Joel Bailey was a great musician in Atlanta at the time, and he had built a studio, and so worked with him a ton, and thought, well, this is cool because I know him so well, this, that, and the other. And then when he got into starting working on the movie industry, and kind of stopped recording,
right, went with the money,
right. And that's when I found you. And I was like, okay.
Went with the money and then found me who was just ignoring.
Right. So I remember calling you and being like, so, hey, man, I'm in this band and I was told to call you and I want to record. And you were like, okay, are you making vinyl? I was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, I want to. And you're like, okay, well, here's how I work. And I only record you if I like you. And I was like, well, all right, well, this is cool.
It shows you how much of my dick era I was in.
Yeah. And I was like,
that was your first call to me. I had no idea.
No, and no, it was actually a good call, but at the
I
time,
was just trying to be direct, probably.
Right. You were just telling me, hey, look, I don't record just anybody.
And I had been burned by so many.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I don't do demos and
right.
Part of it is bands just don't realize what they're getting into.
Yeah.
And our whole story was crazy anyway, because people were nearly dying and actually dying and all through the process.
I almost died the day we were supposed to walk in the studio. I was getting heart surgery.
Yeah. Was that the first day?
Yeah. That we had to postpone. Yeah.
I mean, I just know that album was supposed to take a few weeks and ended up taking almost a year. 2 years?
To get out, yeah.
Yeah.
Over 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of craziness. But anyway.
Which happens.
Yeah.
It seems to be a story.
But it worked out. And when we walked in here, the only part of the recording process I really hate, I know how serious it is, but it's the setup and getting the tones thing.
Yeah.
And I walked in and you had your own kit already set up and you had all these ribbon mics everywhere. And I was like, oh, look at this guy. And then the other thing that I found really cool was, you guys can see some of this, but there is no control room in the studio.
No.
You were sitting right in the room with us.
Yep.
And it was like you were with us and you were
Part of the band, right?
part of the band. And that happened really, really quickly. Like
Yeah.
we walked in, you had built, you said, oh, I'm not used to doing like half stacks. So I'm going to have to build some boxes.
I built those boxes for you guys.
You built the boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, we use that. I've used those in every production since.
Yeah,
but yeah.
You built those for us. So when we walked in the door, like you had our stuff set up. We had dropped it off here.
That's right.
And when we walked in, it was set up.
Yeah.
And Marco, who was our drummer, who's unfortunately passed, and he was getting the kit right.
Mm-hmm. Adjusting it to him and
adjusting it to him. I walked in and you said, okay, check this out. And I still remember this, and it's probably nothing, but you plugged in your phone and ran pink noise through my amplifier, moved the mic around and went, there it is. And we started recording and you let me hear it. And I was like, holy hell.
For years and years, I've been fast at that stuff because I think people spend, like, I came from the era of someone spending a day getting a snare sound, like a full 10-hour day getting snare sounds was not unusual in 92.
Right. And you're talking how much an hour at the time?
I mean, we were probably one of the cheaper project studios. It was probably more realistically, it would have been $1,500 a day.
Right.
Well, no, $900 a day at that studio. So like the going rate, I think, if I remember correctly, I may be totally wrong on these numbers, but I think like Southern Tracks you could get for $1,500 a day. That's Southern Tracks, you know.
Right.
It was a nice recording studio. And that was probably not with the engineer. That's just the room.
Right.
But still, you're talking about at least $500 to $1,000 a day
just to get a snare sound.
To get a snare sound. Your ears acclimate to whatever's happening, and there's no way you can judge that. It's the same with a mix or anything else. You can't like mix things on the same day that you're tracking. You can't judge a mix on the same day that you mixed it. You can't master a mix on the same day that you mixed it. Like you have to have some separation so you can come in fresh and listen to things. And there's just no way that you're going to really, and nobody's really going to care in the end what that snare sounds like. So for me, it's like, make sure everything's not clipping. I know what mics work, where they work. I usually experiment with one thing, which is a Steve Albini thing I got, which is like, you know, if you're going to experiment, just choose one thing. Change one thing and do it differently and leave everything else like that, you know, works. And that pink noise thing isn't a good example of that. It's just, it's a way of finding the point where you're capturing all the frequencies evenly coming out of the speaker. And once you found it, there's really nothing else to do. And you just step away. And it's the same thing with drums or anything else. So I probably tested the mics on that kit and get them roughed in, and then he moved stuff around and I just adjusted a little bit.
And I think we had an hour we were recording, which is
probably two to be realistic, but yeah, hour and a half, 2.
Well, that's from walking in the studio, saying our hellos, having a beer, getting calm, getting acclimated to recording was an hour and a half to 2 hours.
But that's important for anyone who's into recording, especially if you're recording a band live, which you should be. Yeah. If you are in a band that plays live, you should be recording yourself all in the same room live, in my opinion. There's no other way to do it, and I'll go to the mat on that with anybody. Not that you can't stack tracks and stuff, but that's a different vibe, and it's not a band. Yeah. It's just not a band. But if you're in the same room, you want to get there as quickly as you possibly can, and just, it's kind of a guerrilla move, and like you just capture everything in the room live that's happening and get things happening as quickly as possible and get people feel like, you know, oh, we're already moving forward. We're already doing this. And then you end up getting so much done and so much productive material out of that.
Yeah, I think we ended up with 3 songs like done that day.
Usually 2 to 3 songs in a day is what I'll try to track. And then we'll come back the next day and it's already set up. Right. And we'll track another 2 or 3 just until until it's not happening. Yeah. And then you do that for a few weekends and you got a record.
So all right, I'm going to be the guitar player here and you're going to be the engineer producer. Okay. I know this, and I don't mean to sound like a know-it-all, but
you are a know-it-all.
Depends on what we're talking about. At one point of my life, someone taught me what you're used to hearing coming out of the speaker live is not going to sound the same. If you want to hear that sound, once it's recorded, it's not going to be the same.
No, well, so here's the...
So talk on some of that.
Here's the comical thing about like all of this stuff. When you're talking about amps and guitars and like the obvious one is Jimi Hendrix. Everybody's like, oh, what's the Jimi Hendrix sound? You know, or the Paul McCartney and John Lennon sound or whatever it might be that they're going for. Oh, well, they use this guitar and this amp. But that's like negating the entire, this like long chain of electronics that happens and analog tape and all these things that happen way after the amp. So like if you were lucky enough to go see Hendrix play live back in the day, you would have heard something that sounded way different than what you heard on the record, even if he was using the same amps, which he probably was.
Right.
Probably wasn't even using the same guitars. You know, he may not even been using the Strat on some of those songs that you think he's using the Strat on. You know, but what's happening, I mean, the mics they choose, where they place the mic. Is it like right up against the speaker back in the room, or are they combining multiple mics?
Yeah.
What compressors are they going through? Is it hitting tape? Back then, it most certainly was. How hard is it hitting the tape? What formula of tape is it? What happened in the mastering chain after that? I mean, you know, how was it mixed? What board was it mixed on? Like all of these things that are individually subtle, but when you stack them all together, it's just dramatically different. And it's not what a guitar, like your guitar sound that you're hearing on a record is not anywhere close to what it sounded like in the room.
Right.
Typically, number one, most of the time nobody sticks their ear up against a speaker. And usually we're sticking, you know, a mic, or you're probably sticking an SM57 up against a cone. Have you ever stuck your ear? I have. Have you ever stuck your ear up against the cone to hear what it sounded like? That's why I went with the pink noise stuff, because it was like, this is, I'm going to go deaf.
Right.
Just trying to listen to where the best spot is, like putting my ear up next to the mic and listening like a dummy. You know, it's not a pleasant sound.
Well, yeah. So I think a lot of people are like, this is my sound. All right, let's say your sound is everything rolled to 10. That's my sound. That's the sound.
Sure.
Okay. That's going to sound like crap recorded.
Well, it's funny. Like, I think we did this with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
You came in, set your amps up the way you normally set them up.
Right.
I want to hear what they sound like.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, okay, understand we're putting mics on this. I think I was using ribbon mics with you guys on your guitars. Yeah, which I liked at the time a lot. You don't actually want to record the tones quite as overdriven as you would normally play them live in the room or something like that, because you want to have room to control that gain, and you're going to stack different elements on top of that anyway. So usually I would be dialing your gain back a little bit, and probably, you know, dropping a little mid here and there. I'd be doing things that I know I'm probably going to need to do with this particular microphone anyway, or something. And we just kind of like tweak it a little bit, but we'd start with what you were used to, you know?
Right.
And what I would try to do is, okay, I hear this in the room. I need to get it sounding as close to that on tape as I can. What do I need to adjust to get it to sound like that on this end?
Right. And that ties everything back to what you were talking about. You should be recording live. You would hope that the engineer, the studio, the producer, whatever it happens to be, you would hope that you have some sort of trust in them. You would hope that you know that they know what they're doing.
Right.
And you would, that's a little part where you're okay, this is what I want it to sound like in the end. Something like this.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do? Because if you don't, and if you go, no, you're going to leave that alone, we're going to record it like that.
And I can do that. Like I've done that before, and I can make it work okay. I just know that I know that if I'm not hearing the attack of your pick,
right,
and I'm not hearing kind of the bloom of the low end and stuff, it's getting too compressed already at the amp. Yes. I know that like it is what it is, and it's going to be that, and I can't do any more with it. I can't add dynamics to your sound. So that usually it's just like, okay, it seems like we're overdriving this a little heavy. And that's always a tricky thing with like metal, is like, okay, you don't want to take the energy out of it.
Sure.
Like you got to be able to do pinch harmonics and all your stuff. You've got to be high gain.
Right.
But we're talking like minuscule,
Yeah.
like you may have had the gain up to 7 and I turned it down to 6.5. Like
Right.
it wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to where, okay, now I hear that attack and I can, get a little movement out of it. So, and a lot of it too is like I don't think we stacked a lot of guitars on that record. I know there were some places where you might have played a clead part on a different guitar and stuff.
No, if I remember right, we did a channel each and then one kind of in the middle.
And then some stingers.
Tracks.
We did some stingers where we would double up little parts.
And I was used to kind of doing more doublings of stuff and that kind of thing, but we didn't this time. And I was worried it wasn't going to be as heavy as I'm used to.
But it's heavier.
And
that's how my rig is all developed.
Mm-hmm.
Like out of that is like the less you layer stuff, the closer you are to the actual part in the performance.
Right.
And less you double stuff. And like you could do cool stuff, but then you end up with a sound of guitar. Well, somebody said this recently, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who it was. I think I saw it on TikTok. Some producer was talking about this, classic producer guy. It was like, you can either end up with the sound of a wall of guitar, or you can hear what a guitarist sounds like what the individual guitarist sounds like. And it's always, to me, been like, if you're listening to like AC/DC or something like that, very like, especially on the early stuff, it's just two guitars. Yeah. And they're not even that high. They're not anywhere near as distorted as you think they are.
Right.
And you can hear each of them interacting with each other, and it's cool. Like you can sit there and listen to it in headphones and go, man, I feel like I'm standing right by their amps. This is awesome.
Right.
But then later on, especially as you got into the 90s, man, the wall of guitar that everybody wanted to have, and you just get into phasing issues and all this weird stuff. You could do some very cool stuff layering, but it's hard to do right, and it doesn't really sound like a performance to me at that point. It just sounds like ambience. So like Smashing Pumpkins, we were talking about Smashing Pumpkins recently.
Right.
Like you were playing one of those riffs and stuff. Like I was listening to Gish the other day, and like that's pretty much, it's got some overdubs on it, but I mean, it's pretty straight up.
Yeah.
And that sounds great. It's mixed kind of weird 90s, like heavy drums kind of mix, but the guitars are a little low in my opinion. But I like that era of, that was Butch Vig, wasn't it? I think that was Vig. Yeah. I like that era of his stuff, but then you get to Siamese Dream, and I know this is what they were after, but just the layers and layers of guitars, and I just, it doesn't do it for me. Like it, to me, that felt, when I say overproduced, I just mean like glossy. Like I don't feel the performance.
Right.
So I have this biamp system with a guitar. I have two bands. One is a 2-guitar band, and one's just a single, like 3-piece, like 1 guitar, bass, drums, vocal, like literally as straightforward. Who, Zeppelin, Loud Humans is just straightforward power trio.
Right.
Hendrix, all that kind of stuff. We're not playing that kind of music. We're playing, weird indie rock, moody shit. But that's the idea. It's like power trio, right? So how do you do that without layering a bunch of other guitar? How do you capture that recording in a way that's big and dynamic and full and crazy, and it sounds as heavy as it does in the room, without layering a bunch of guitars? And the answer is you biamp that, and you have different tones coming out of different amps. And I've got it to the point, I think last episode we talked about, I've got a Twilight stereo, a Twilighter stereo Magnetone that's got 2 10s with this FM modulation going between them. So I got 2 mics there. Lasers. And then I've got that MiG 50, which is my Bassman clean sound, kind of like not totally clean, but cleanish sound. And that's got drives or whatever I want going through it. And I put 3 mics on it, and the drums are right next to me when we record. And the bass player's right over there in the same room. And he's biamping. So we've got a Dean, basically like an SVT cabinet, it is a 8x10 SVT cabinet with Dean Costello amp, which essentially is like a SVT on steroids. It's 300. Then he's got a Mesa amp going into 215. Like it's just an insane bass rig. Like if we ever, like I don't know how we would tour with it. But when we play around locally, it's just mammoth, and
then
people freak out.
Aluminum bass he's playing.
Aluminum neck bass, and I've got it aluminum guitar on some of the stuff that Randy built for me. And then we've got, our drummer's playing a metal Tama kit, but we're not playing metal, but it's just that thing projects.
Right.
It's one of those 80s Tama, 22-inch kit kind of things. But so we got a lot of sound coming out, and it's just a matter of like miking everything up in a way that when we capture it, like I want to not do any overdub. It should not have any overdubs on it that are critical. Like anything we do that's an overdub is just like an ambient, like in the background, barely hear it kind of thing. And when you do that with that kind of setup, you've got a lot of control in the stereo spread and how much you distort this thing. And, like I could treat it like 3 guitars basically, and it works. Like it sounds big. If you listen to the first EP we put out, like there is very little overdubs on any of that. The only thing everything is live, and then we added vocals, and there's a few percussion overdubs and stuff like that. And it's a big sound. And I don't think if we had layered stuff, we would get that. Like that's been my trajectory, is to go from like the single amp with the one mic on it, or maybe two guitarists playing together, and then layering and all that stuff, to get more and more away into like, how can we what's the biggest way we can capture this all together in the room? Because part of it too is that you got the bleed into the drum mics and all of that stuff, and you get the feel of the room. And
that was one of the things that I really enjoyed being here when we recorded. And one of the things that I think I learned a lot from you was, number one, we don't care about bleed as much. I was always worried about bleed, this, that, and the other. Yes, we built boxes for our mics to help control it.
Yeah.
But the bleed was a cool thing. The other thing was, I used to be a big time note taker and be like, here's how we're going to do everything. And you're like, yeah, you just killed the whole vibe. And I think I'm going off on this tangent, because it's like, you should be recording your band as it is at that time. It's a picture. It's a snapshot of what the band was.
It's a document,
at that time. Is it perfect? No, it shouldn't be.
Well, and that's another thing too, is that this is a common gripe among many of us old heads, but the fix it in Pro Tools kind of thing. Like, I don't think people understand that they're ruining what's good about the band. Like, part of it, like as a producer, my role is always to sit there and tell people not to redo that, because that little mistake you made that you think is a mistake, that was the coolest thing that happened.
Right.
Like, keep that and let's work from that, and let's make that a moment.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes that can't convince you, and you're like, no, we got to redo that. And we're like, okay, I tried. But usually, because I'm looking at this like the audience, and the stuff that the band thinks was like a colossal fuck up or whatever is like the most exciting moment for the audience, because it's like, man, things almost fell apart there, and then it came together and just seemed like glorious when it came back together. Like those kind of moments that where things go a little awry, is kind of like where the magic is. And you're taking the magic out when you like start nudging stuff around and correcting little things. I mean, you hit a clam note, that's one thing, but if you hit a clam note that's still in key and it sounds cool, and the feed, in the mix of everything, sometimes it's not a bad thing.
Not at all. And there's been fix-its for a long time. It used to be much harder.
Oh yeah.
Because you had to literally cut tape and splice it and all that kind of stuff.
Back in the day in analog tape, I was the king of punch-ins, man. I could punch in guitars.
So, punch in, that kind of stuff. People have been fixing stuff, but now it's just so easy to make everything perfect. They're like, oh, well, it's perfect. Music is not perfect. There shouldn't.
Perfect is not music. It's
that's actually better. Perfect is not musical. How about that? You take the musicalness out of it when you make everything perfect. Now, obviously, you want your tempo to be close, but sometimes push and pulls are cool.
Yeah, man. I have this thing about tempo. TikTok is hilarious to me. Like, you get this producer talk,
Right.
where these guys are just like laying down the law of like, if you can't play to a click track, you're not a real band and all this kind of stuff, or you're not a real drummer. And I'm just like, okay, maybe if you're a session guy, you need to have that skill or whatever.
Yeah.
But the idea of consistent tempo being any kind of valid factor, unless you're just practicing, is so bizarre to me. It's so incredibly bizarre to me, to the point where I'm like, I'm going to start doing this solo project pretty soon. That's just going to be singer-songwriter, vocal, and electric guitar kind of thing, Jimmy Ether solo kind of stuff. And one of the key elements that I'm going to mess with is tempo. I'm going to purposely slow down and speed things up, because that's no different than volume, or distortion,
true,
or singing high and singing low, and like, it's another brush of the palette, a color that you can use. That, man, talk about the effect. Like, I think in recording you guys, you probably remember, I was like, you played through a few times. I was like, man, this is really good, but what if we slowed it down a little bit? I mean, I think we slowed down probably Dino Rider, and certainly we slowed down Spaced Off. And and it was like, you guys are just kind of rushing through these riffs that are good, man. Give them time to bloom, and like just changing the tempo by a couple of beats dramatically changed the songs, and that happens all the time.
There's tempo, there's the how many beats per minute, but if you're playing at 125 beats per minute and you're playing on the 1, and then all of a sudden you play on the you're still in tempo.
Oh, sure.
And that's where but that wasn't exactly on the 1. Well, that's called swing.
Right.
And
that's a whole other topic too. Yeah.
I would love for somebody to take and solo Eddie Van Halen's rhythm tracks.
Which are impeccable.
And put a metronome on them.
Or anything, man. I mean,
it'd be all over the place, but he had so much swing. Nobody has that kind of swing anymore. Nobody.
There's this great hip hop channel on YouTube you should check out called Digging in the Greats.
Yeah.
They're way bigger than we are. So, no need for us to promote them, but definitely check them out. Or him out. But he just did a thing on D'Angelo. I don't know if you're familiar with D'Angelo's work, but there's a song on Black Messiah, and forgive me, I forget the name of the song now, but he's just analyzing the groove of it, and it's brilliant. This song is brilliant. It's just really smoky, crazy, vibey sounding, but like, it's got that Jay Dilla sort of like beat swagger kind of thing. I don't know if you're familiar with Jay Dilla,
a little bit,
the beat maker guy, but he had this whole thing where he would play to the grid, but he nudge things around it, like you're saying. He would sway, like the hi-hats would come in a little early, and the snare would be a little late, and the kick would be sort of like a weird pattern, and people were like, "What the hell is going on?" But he was just purposely manipulating things, and it influenced a lot of drummers to start doing that naturally, like Questlove and people like that. So D'Angelo was a big proponent of that kind of stuff. And man, you listen to every element of this recording, the drums have a groove that's in the pocket, but it's not on the grid. You like line it up and you see it kind of moving and drifting around.
Yeah.
And the bass player is purposely playing way behind the beat. And he's playing a line that takes 8-9 measures to come around again. So it's meandering, walking bass line. And then you have everything that gets layered on top of that, and everything is a little out, and it makes the coolest groove.
Yeah.
Like just mysterious, and you're always on the edge of your seat. And it's a mellow song. So to have a mellow song and keep people on the edge of their seat, is pretty big, accomplishment. But that's all like playing with a groove, and that is metronomic, and that it's not a tempo varying song.
Sure,
it's playing within the tempo, but because it probably I don't think they played to a metronome, but it's like it is consistent kind of loop of the drums feel.
Yeah, man,
there's just so much to play with, and when people ignore that or feel like they have to like line things up and all, they're kind of missing the point a lot of times.
So for years I've recorded and mixed in other places, and again, all the stuff turned out great, but I would say, okay, we'd be in here, we'd be working, I'd say, that vocal. I don't feel like that vocal's sitting right. You need to bring the vocal up. And you'd stop everything, and all of a sudden you'd be working on a kick drum, and I'm like, "Is this dude deaf?" What the fuck? I said,
not explaining myself at all.
Not explaining yourself at all.
Right.
And I was like,
or the bass guitar.
So I thought you were hearing something that I wasn't hearing. So I was like, you would do something, I'd go, okay, now do something with the vocal, and I just did, and then you would unmute everything. I'd be like, son of a bitch, this dude really knows what the hell he's doing.
Well,
because here I was thinking it was a level thing, and you were hearing. What
was masking it. Yeah.
Right. And that changed everything. And that was one of those things where, that was one of those experiences where I was like, oh, this is what somebody that really knows. It's not just turn up something. It's why is this not working in this one spot? There's something, like you just said, there's something masking it there.
There's an element of mixing this psychology that's weird. Like I can't really, like I think other mixing engineers we would sit around and we go, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but we couldn't really explain it. Stuff like,
right,
if the vocal is like, I don't have to touch the vocal level at all, and you're like, the vocal seems a little low, and I can go to the bass and I can dial in a frequency that's in the range of the vocal and turn it up, where the bass in that little area that's matching with the vocal is louder, which you would think that's going to make it worse.
Right.
But no, now you hear the vocal better because you're more focused on that area, whereas you were more focused on low frequency information before. It's like, what is the thing that's like, in the moment where this vocal sounds too quiet, what is going on in the song that's drawing your attention away from the vocal? And it's like, well, let's take that closer to the vocal, and then they become this unified force. It's really weird. And I don't know how I came across that, but I've talked with a lot of other folks who are like, that's true. I do that too. I don't even know why, but I don't know how it works, but it is like a psychological aspect of listening to music where your attention goes. It's just interesting.
If you're just a guitar player and you like playing guitar, cool. But if you want to do more, do it. There's no reason why you can't. If you want to build a guitar, why can't you? Who said you can't?
Yeah, don't wait for permission.
Yeah, I did. It took way too long. That's why I'm 50 years old and just started building guitars 7 years ago. Yeah. And that was, when I say building, that was when my apprenticeship started. I really started building 2 years ago. So, yeah.
Nobody knows what they're doing.
Right.
And nobody who's done anything waited for permission.
When you started recording, did you know all the stuff you know now?
Nothing.
No. When I built my first guitar, or when I was working doing an apprenticeship at that shop that I was at for 6 years, I had no idea I had some idea. Again, I learned that stuff from gigging. What happens when you snatch a strap out? Well, let's see. How can we fix this? Toothpicks. Right. Anybody. Sure. So I learned those type of things.
Yeah.
So, but just do it. Quit making excuses and just do it.
Cool.
Yeah. So again, this has been Fretful Dreams. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Send us comments. Tell me I'm a dumbass. It won't hurt my feeling. Trust me, I've been told it millions of times.
You can tell me too, but I just don't care.
Yeah, Ryan doesn't care. Excuse me, Jimmy doesn't care.
It's fine. Next podcast, nothing but picks.
Yes, only picks. Fender, the real thin ones.
No.
The worst. All right, see ya.
Fretful Dreams is part of the Headphone Treats podcasting network.